There's a recall election. It comes after Sept.
Larry Elder speaks in San Diego, is posted September 3rd, 2021, KUSI News. So I assume this is what he said today. Larry Elder, what do you think about California, Newsom, and, all the rest of everything else, huh?
Brenda, thank you for that. Michael, Nick, Jeff, members of the media, thank you for all coming out. Get this up a little higher. This is not just...
Real quick, before I let that run, I just want to... Here's a picture. This is the last bombing that the U.S. forces did in Afghanistan, the last bombing, killing 5 kids and 3 adults, right? 5 kids, 3 adults. And there's 10 civilians. And then this army guy, this ally, this guy was an army Afghan commander that was, on the American side, so it was on our side. So we killed children, we killed civilians, we killed our allies, or an ally. All right, Larry Elder.
Just principles. This is personal. There's a recall election. It comes after September 14th. We're going to have a new person in Sacramento, and that new person is going to be Larry Elder, and I'll tell you why. We have, for the first time in our state's history, we've been around 170 years, for the first time in our state's history, people are leaving California. And when middle-class people leave, by that I'm talking about people making between $50 and $100K, the number one reason they cite for leaving is the price of a house. The average price of a home in California just hit $800,000. That is 150% above the national average, or 250% above the national average, depending upon which survey you look at. The Hoover Institution just put out a 50-page report and found out the rate at which businesses are leaving California is 50% higher than the rate at which businesses have been leaving California for the previous 3 years. And they cite the high cost of living, taxes, and the onerous regulatory environment that California business people are facing. Wealthy people are leaving. And unless you don't care about the wealthy, I know a lot of people do not, understand that the top 1% pay nearly 50% of our state income taxes, which is the largest revenue for California. 1% pay 50% of all the state income taxes. And when they leave, they take their tax revenues with them. We have the decline in the quality of education. Before the pandemic, 80% of our kids in our government schools are black and brown. I only mention that because the left prides itself on caring about black and brown people. The ones who are getting the most hurt, the ones who are getting the most shafted because of the decline in quality of our government schools are black and brown students. Before the pandemic, 75% of black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency. That is not a typo. I know I speak quickly. I'll say it again. 75% of black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency, and those levels are already low, and the math scores are even worse. 50% of third graders could not read at state levels of proficiency. Again, those levels are low. Math scores are even worse. I went to an inner city high school. I just checked. My high school right now, only 2% of the kids are math proficient. This is before the pandemic, and they were denied a whole year of in-person education while his own kids, Gavin Newsom's own kids, were enjoying in-person education at a private school. We know that he was sitting up there at the French Laundry restaurant with the very people that drafted the mandate that they were violating by not wearing masks and by not engaging in social distancing. And has been pointed out, his own winery was exempted from the very mandates he was foisting down the throats of everybody else. Churches were shut down, but liquor stores and marijuana dispensaries were somehow essential businesses. They were kept open. I was just up in Sherman Oaks. There's a restaurant there called Pineapple Hill. The owner of that restaurant, at considerable expense, put tables outside, chairs outside, set everything up so her customers could be served outside so they could engage in social distancing in the open air. She got shut down. While there was a movie studio right next to her, people were eating outdoors on the very kind of tables that she had set up right next to it. Why? Because the movie industry had put a lot of money into my opponent, and they apparently had more clout than regular mom-and-pop owners of restaurants. We know how badly he's been managing the fires. We know how badly he's been managing our water system. We're running out of water because we're not investing in our water infrastructure. We know about all the mismanagement of the Educational Development Department. $30 billion stolen from criminals. People applying for education benefits from jail and getting them. People applying for educational benefits, crooks in Nigeria and getting them. $30 billion, while 1 million Californians were waiting for their unemployment checks, which they deserve since the government shut them down. Now, this is personal, not just principle. There was a restaurant in my family for years, 35 years, Elder Snack Bar, 1230 South Valencia. Taste the difference. And Nick, I used to work with the old man. I know how hard it is working with the old man. Demanding. And there's a word for people that work 9 to 5 when they have their own business. It's called bankrupt. You have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. A third of all small businesses are now closed forever because of what Gavin Newsom did. All the hopes, all the dreams of these restaurant owners closed forever because Gavin Newsom ignored the science and shut down this economy. As I said, while keeping big box stores open, shutting down small stores, leaving marijuana dispensaries open, liquor stores open, shutting down churches. Absolutely outrageous. Against science. On again, off again, on again, off again. Nobody could keep up with what he was doing.
So what I love about the discoloration correcting serum is that it has 4% niacinamide and 2% tranexamic acid. These are both great ingredients for anyone dealing.
We need a change. We need common sense. We need somebody who understands business, understands trade-offs, somebody who's really going to follow the science and not pretend that he's following the science. I find it fascinating that I'm accused of being somebody who does not want to follow the science. He's blaming his mismanagement of the forest fires on climate change. When the outgoing governor, Jerry Brown, had a plan to clear 500,000 acres of fallen trees and dry vegetation, and Gavin Newsom bragged that he cleared 90,000 acres, which, if true, would have been a drop in the bucket. But it wasn't true. He only cleared about 13% of what he said, which meant he lied by a factor of 7. And now, I understand Joe Biden is here in California and going to campaign for him. Same man who mismanaged the Afghanistan withdrawal. Let's call it the Afghanistan disaster, which is exactly what it is. I want to see Joe Biden defend Gavin Newsom's record on crime, which is up in every major city here in California. Up 40% in Los Angeles. Shootings, homicides. Why? Well, during the pandemic, this man released 20,000 convicted felons early, many of whom are violent offenders, and based upon history, the majority of them are likely to reoffend. Just the other day, Barbara Boxer had her cell phone taken. She was mugged in Oakland, and a few days before that, the police chief complained about money being diverted from his police department. This defund the police movement, absurd. And we have 2 soft-on-crime DAs, and Gavin Newsom's fingerprints are on both of them. The one in Los Angeles is named George Gascon. Gavin Newsom gave his first job as a police chief, recommended that he run and get elected as DA of San Francisco, and now he's the DA of Los Angeles. He believes in cashless bail, does not believe in charging criminals to the fullest extent, and we have a Proposition 47 that allows criminals to steal up to $950 every single day, every single store, without fear of going to jail, because all they are is having committed a misdemeanor. They get a ticket, and of course, since we have cashless bail, it doesn't matter whether or not they show up. On every front, the economy, on the management of the forest, on the management of our water system, on the poor quality of our educational system, the fact that people are leaving California for the very first time, Gavin Newsom has been an absolute disaster, and come September 14, we're going to have a change. So I'm asking you to vote for no on the recall part, and then vote for Larry Elder to replace him. But I got to tell you something, no matter who replaces him, it will be awfully difficult to do as poor a job as this man has done. So vote yes on the recall system, and then vote for Larry Elder to replace Gavin Newsom. I'll now take a couple of questions. Am I afraid of the cheating? Of course I'm afraid of the cheating. And now, of course, you can print your own ballot. What could possibly go wrong? We know what happened in the 2020 election. We know about all the shenanigans that took place in the 2020 election. We're quite concerned about that. On my website, which is electelder.com, which I urge all of you to go to, put something in the tip jar because I can't raise and spend an unlimited amount of money. He can. If you spot anything irregular, anything that seems strange, we have a whole battery of lawyers, and one of the reasons why the lawsuits failed in the 2020 election is they were filed too late. The courts do not like overturning an election, so they set them all aside on procedural grounds. We're filing lawsuits when we find out things that happen, when they happen right away. But I got to tell you something. I am convinced that so many people are angry. People like Nick, people like Brenda, people like Jeff are angry, and not just Republicans. 1.7 million people signed that petition. A third of them were Republicans, were Democrats and independents who just voted for him 2 years earlier. 65% of Hispanics voted for him 2 years earlier. Now the majority of Hispanics want him out, and they know why. Because a large percentage of them were small business owners who lost everything. They're the ones being shafted the most by our public schools because 80% of the kids in our government schools are black and brown, and they're the ones who cannot find a home. As I mentioned, when people making between 50 and 100K leave California, the number one reason they cite is that they cannot find a home. They cannot buy a home. And those burdens are disproportionately falling on the shoulders of brown citizens here in California. So I believe there's going to be a groundswell to get him out. So even when they cheat, they're still going to lose. Yeah, the question was, how do I get people to go back to work? Well, what I won't do is incentivize people into not working. I won't be signing any more minimum wage hikes. Let me tell you about the minimum wage. Some years ago, the mayor of L.A., whose name is Eric Garcetti, he's a Democrat, had a proposal to raise the minimum wage to $12. It's now $15. And I know this is true because several people called my radio show and told me about what happened, and they all pretty much said the same thing, so they couldn't have coordinated it. He invited about 30 people, like Jeff, like Nick, who were people that hired minimum wage people, and they all brought their profit and loss statements. And they all told them about the thin margins they operate under, and if you jack up the number one cost of running a business, any business, which is labor, we're going to have to do a few things. Either defer hiring people, cut hours, raise prices, all of which have negative consequences. And they begged him to a person not to do it. He listened very intently. He stood up, he buttoned his coat, and he said, and I quote, "I believe you can absorb the increase," end of quote. This man has never run a hot dog stand telling people who work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, "I believe you can absorb the cost." It is insulting. And by the way, Garcetti attended the London School of Economics. He, by the way, majored in ethnic studies. But you think just by osmosis, by walking down the hall, maybe he learned a little something. But people like that don't know the difference between Adam Smith and Adam 12. It's outrageous. One more question? Okay.
What do you think of the whole campaign against Newsom being branded as a right-wing conspiracy run by white supremacists?
Yeah, he said, what do I make of this campaign to recall Gavin Newsom being accused of being a Republican conspiracy run by white supremacists? Well, the LA Times, every single day is a new headline. I found out that I am a woman-hating, tax-avoiding, gun-toting, black face of white supremacy. And that's just last week. Shows you they're scared. They're scared. I'm from the hood. I wasn't born on third base and thought I hit a triple like my opponent. My father came to California in 1945 without 2 nickels to rub together. He was an 8th grade dropout. Started a little cafe, the one I mentioned. Went to the middle class. My father always told me hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, but you're 100% in control of the effort. Before you moan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, my father always said this: no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later bad things are going to happen. My father was a lifelong Republican, and he always told me this about left-wing people in the Democratic Party. They want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. And they are afraid that I'm going to break the stranglehold that they've had over black and brown people here in California. The largest group of people in California are Hispanics, not whites, Hispanics. And the cafe where my dad worked, where my dad set up, was an area called Pico Union. My clientele was 1/3 black, 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 white. It was like United Nations down there. and they're afraid I'm going to be able to make a connection to the black community. They're afraid I'm going to be able to make a connection to the brown community that Republicans have not made in the past. And I will rebrand the vision of the Republican Party in California so that more and more people are going to say, why in the world am I with a tax, spend, regulate party that's causing people to leave, that's causing my life to be far more uncomfortable? Why should I be in bed with these guys? I'm going to get a lot of people to rethink their allegiance to the Democratic Party, and they're afraid.